In the shadowed twilight of a Chicago spring, Abigail Harper stood alone in a parking lot, her breath catching in her throat like a trapped bird. The renovated boathouse before her glowed with warmth, its floor-to-ceiling windows spilling golden light across Lake Michigan's restless surface. Laughter and music drifted from within, a celebration of her mother's 60th year, a milestone Abigail had crossed oceans of time and distance to honour. Yet here she stood, gift in hand, barred from entry by her own blood. Her father's. Voice still echoed in her mind, cold as the April wind, "You're not on the list." Abigail was no stranger to exclusion. At 34, she had carved a life of her own in Boston, a city that thrummed with ambition and possibility. As vice president of operations at Vertex Technologies, she commanded respect, wielded power, and shaped destinies with the precision of a master strategist. But in the house of her childhood, she was nothing more than a ghost, half forgotten, half cropped from the family portrait. Her sister Elizabeth smirked from the doorway, her triumph as sharp as a blade. Her father Robert stood sentinel, his gaze unyielding. And her mother, Patricia, the woman who once wove paper crowns for her, was nowhere to be seen. This was no mere oversight. This was a calculated strike, a public shaming orchestrated by those who should have loved her most. Abigail's heart pounded, not with sorrow, but with a quiet, burning resolve. They thought they could cast her out, laugh at her disgrace. They were wrong. For in the game of family, Abigail Harper was no pawn. She was a player, and the board was about to shift. Abigail Harper was born in the sprawling suburbs of Chicago, where maple-lined streets and manicured lawns hid the quiet tensions of her family's modest empire. The Harpers were not wealthy, but they were proud, their insurance agency a cornerstone of the community, passed down from Robert's father like a tarnished crown. Robert Harper ruled his household with the same rigid discipline he applied to his business, his expectations as unyielding as the ledgers he kept. Patricia, his wife, softened his edges, her warmth a balm to their 3 children. Elizabeth, the eldest, a beacon of academic brilliance. Tyler, the youngest, forever the cherished son. And Abigail, the middle child, caught in the liminal space between. As a child, Abigail learned to navigate the shadows. Elizabeth was the sun, her trophies, and accolades illuminating the family's dining room like sacred relics. Tyler was the moon, his boyish charm reflecting the adoration of all who beheld him. Abigail, though, was a star, bright but distant, often overlooked in the constellation of her siblings. She was not unloved, not precisely, but her place was. Uncertain, her presence a quiet afterthought. In family photographs she stood at the edge, her smile tentative, her body half obscured by Elizabeth's radiance or Tyler's exuberance. Yet Patricia saw her. When Abigail was 7, crushed by her exclusion from a classmate's birthday party, her mother did not dismiss her tears as Robert did. Instead, Patricia sat cross-legged on the living room floor, crafting paper party hats with glitter and glue. "You're special in your own way, Abigail," she whispered, her voice a soft rebellion against the world's indifference. "Never forget that." When Abigail won 3rd place in a science fair at 12, her solar system model a labour, of love rather than genius, Patricia framed the certificate and hung it beside Elizabeth's wall of firsts. Robert removed it 3 days later, muttering about clutter, but Patricia kept it in her bedside drawer, a secret talisman of her daughter's worth. These moments were Abigail's anchors, proof that someone saw her, truly saw her, in a family that often looked past her. At 16, when friends abandoned her for a more popular girls' party, Patricia drove her 2 hours to Chicago's glittering theater district for a musical, treating her like royalty. Sometimes it's quality, not quantity, that matters, she said over dessert at a candlelit restaurant. Abigail clung to these memories through the years, even as the tides of time pulled her family apart. When Abigail chose Boston University over a local college, the decision was a quiet act of defiance. "Why so far?" Robert demanded, his voice thick with accusation. "Are we not good enough for you?" Elizabeth stayed close, enrolling at Northwestern, her path a seamless extension of the family's expectations. Tyler drifted, his ambitions as formless as the Chicago winds. But Abigail sought something else, freedom perhaps, or a chance to define herself beyond the Harper name. Boston was a revelation. The city's pulse matched her own, its cobblestone streets and ivy-clad buildings whispering of possibility. She studied computer science, a field that felt like alchemy, transforming code into power. After graduation, she joined Vertex Technologies, a rising tech giant, and climbed its ranks with a ferocity that surprised even herself. By 34, she was vice president of operations, overseeing 200 employees and a budget that dwarfed her father's insurance agency. Her office overlooked the Charles River, its waters a mirror to her ambition, but success came at a cost. The distance between Chicago and Boston was not merely geographic. Robert's disapproval hardened into silence, his calls rare and clipped. Elizabeth, now a partner in the family business, grew resentful, her emails laced with subtle barbs. Tyler, once her ally in childhood pranks, became a stranger, his texts dwindling to monosyllables. And Patricia, the mother who once drove hours for a musical, began to fade. Her weekly calls became monthly, then sporadic, her voice distracted, as if listening through a fog. The rift widened during holidays, when Abigail returned to Chicago bearing gifts embossed with Vertex's logo. "Still at the computer company?" Robert would ask, as if her career were a childish hobby. Elizabeth's barbs grew sharper, her resentment spilling over at a Thanksgiving 3 years prior. "You think you're so special with your fancy. Boston life," she hissed, slicing pumpkin pie with a knife's vicious precision. "You have no idea what it's like here, dealing with Mom and Dad every day while you send gift baskets and call that family." "I call every week," Abigail protested, her voice low to avoid a scene. "I invite you all to visit." "Show off," Elizabeth snapped. "Everything's a competition with you, Abigail. Always has been." The irony was bitter. Abigail had spent her childhood cheering Elizabeth's victories, her own achievements modest by comparison. But Elizabeth's words struck a deeper wound. "Mum doesn't brag about your job," she said. "She doesn't even understand what you do. At least I'm here being a real daughter." Those words haunted Abigail, a poison that seeped into her dreams. The final fracture came at the previous Thanksgiving. Elizabeth's latest jab, "Your empty life must be so fulfilling," pushed Abigail past endurance. "At least I built my life myself," she retorted, her fork clattering against her plate. "I didn't slide into Dad's business and pretend that makes me special." The table fell silent, Patricia's face pale, Robert's eyes blazing. "I think you should leave," Elizabeth said, her voice a quiet triumph. Abigail did, packing her bag and flying back to Boston that night. No one called to apologize. No one called at all. 3 months later, a Facebook post shattered her fragile equilibrium. Elizabeth had organised a grand celebration for Patricia's 60th birthday, a public event page adorned with a banner proclaiming, "Patricia Harper, 60 years of love." The guest list was a roll call of extended family, neighbours, even Patricia's college roommate from Florida. Abigail's name was absent. She stared at the screen in her darkened office, the blue light casting shadows across her face. It was midnight, and she was still working, the cleaning staff's vacuum. A distant hum. This was the life her family scorned, yet it was the life that had made her. She called Patricia that night, her voice trembling. "I saw about your birthday party on Facebook." "Oh, that," Patricia said, surprised. "Brooke said you were too busy. That big project, the Singapore expansion." "Mum, it's your 60th birthday," Abigail interrupted. "Of course I'd make time." The conversation was awkward, Patricia's warmth tempered by hesitation. But she insisted. Abigail come, and Abigail booked a first-class ticket to Chicago, spending $2,100 she couldn't easily afford. She chose her gift with care, a vintage emerald brooch, reminiscent of one Patricia had loved and lost, paired with a spa package at a resort her mother had long admired. The total cost neared $3,000, but Abigail wanted to prove she still knew her mother's heart. She prepared for the trip like a general planning a campaign. Her outfit, a sapphire blue dress, conservative yet stylish, was chosen to signal success without arrogance. She rehearsed conversations in her bathroom mirror, practicing deflections and apologies. "So great to see everyone," she murmured, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry about Thanksgiving, Elizabeth, even though you started it." The night before her flight, a text from Elizabeth arrived. "Heard you're coming. Just don't make this weekend about you." Abigail's reply was measured. "Looking forward to celebrating Mom." The boathouse was a vision of elegance, its wooden beams and lakefront views a perfect reflection of Patricia's understated taste. Abigail arrived clutching her gift, her heart, a tangle of hope and dread. She recognized familiar cars in the parking lot, Uncle Richard's Corvette, Aunt Diane's Subaru, Cousin Samuel's motorcycle. The sight was a bittersweet echo of childhood, a reminder of a time when she belonged. Thomas Pollard, her father's college friend, greeted her outside, his cigarette glowing in the dusk. "Abigail, my goodness, is that you?" he said, his surprise genuine. "You look just like your mother at your age." His words warmed her, but his next comment sowed unease. Patricia was just saying she wished all her children could be here today. Why would Patricia say that if she knew Abigail was coming? Cousin Eliza emerged next, her embrace warm but her words troubling. "I had no idea you were coming. Elizabeth said you couldn't make it because of work." Abigail's unease deepened, but she pressed forward, her gift a shield against doubt. At the entrance, Robert stood like a gatekeeper, his clipboard a weapon of bureaucracy. His eyes hardened at the sight of her. "Abigail," he said, his voice flat. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for Mum's birthday," she replied, her tone light despite the weight in her chest. "Is that so surprising?" He scanned the clipboard with deliberate slowness. "You're not on the list." The words were a blow, sharp and public. Guests nearby turned, their whispers a chorus of judgment. Abigail felt her face flush, but she held her ground. "There must be some mistake. I spoke to Mom last week. She said I should come." "There's no mistake," Robert said, his voice colder than the lake's depths. "This party is for people who actually make time for family." Elizabeth appeared, her pink dress a deliberate echo of Patricia's style, her smile a mask of false concern. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Behind her stood her boyfriend, James Larson, a tall man in an ill-fitting suit, his discomfort palpable. "Morgan's not on the guest list," Robert repeated. "Oh, that's awkward," Elizabeth said, her tone dripping with feigned sympathy. "I thought we discussed this, Abigail." "We didn't discuss anything," Abigail countered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I spoke to Mom directly. Mom probably felt put on the spot. Elizabeth shrugged. You know how she hates confrontation. Abigail's eyes searched the crowd for Patricia, but her mother was nowhere in sight. Where is she? I'd, like to speak with her myself. She's busy with her actual guests, Robert said. I'm not going to let you upset her on her birthday. The whispers grew louder. Is that Abigail? An older woman murmured. I thought she wasn't speaking to the family anymore. Another voice. Elizabeth said she called Patricia an unsupportive mother at Thanksgiving. Elizabeth herself didn't bother to lower her voice. Did she really think she was welcome after what she said? The realization hit Abigail like a storm. This was no misunderstanding. It was a deliberate act of exclusion, a punishment planned with cruel precision. She took a deep breath, willing herself not to break. I understand, she said, her voice calm, almost regal. Please give this to Mom. She handed the gift to Robert, who took it reflexively. Tell her I love her and hope she has a wonderful birthday. She turned and walked away, her steps measured, her back straight. Behind her, Elizabeth's laugh cut through the air, followed by Robert's murmured response. Abigail made it to her rental car before her hands began to shake, her mascara threatening to betray her composure. She gripped the steering wheel, counting her breaths. In 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4. She would not cry here. She would drive back to her hotel, change her flight, and leave this pain behind. A knock on her car window startled her. James Larson stood outside, his expression a mix of concern and apology. Against her better judgment, Abigail lowered the window. Morgan, I mean Ms. Harper, he said, his voice nervous. Just Abigail is fine, she replied, then frowned. Wait, how do you know to call me Ms. Harper? He glanced back at the boathouse, then met her eyes. Because I work at Vertex Technologies in Boston. Software engineering, 3rd floor. I'm James Larson. I transferred from the Chicago office 8 months ago to be closer to Elizabeth on weekends. I recognized you immediately. The revelation was a twist of fate, sharp and surreal. Of all the tech companies in Boston, her sister's boyfriend worked at hers. Does Elizabeth know you work for me? Abigail asked. Not exactly, James admitted. She knows I work at Vertex, but I never specified that you're, well, essentially my boss. May I sit down? He asked, gesturing to the passenger seat. Curiosity won over caution, and Abigail unlocked the door. James slid in, his tall frame making the car feel smaller. I should have said something in there, he began. That wasn't right, what they did. Why didn't you? Her question was sharp, born of hurt. Complicated family dynamics, he sighed. I've only been dating Elizabeth for a year. I'm still navigating it all. But what happened in there wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Abigail's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Last night at the rehearsal dinner, Elizabeth and your dad were talking about what to do if you showed up. Your dad said he'd handle it. Your mum wasn't part of that conversation. The betrayal deepened, a blade twisting in her gut. Does my mother even know I tried to come today? James hesitated. She asked about you earlier, wondered if you might surprise her. Elizabeth told her you'd sent your regrets weeks ago. That's a lie, Abigail whispered. I know, James nodded. I've picked up a lot over the past year. Elizabeth talks about you constantly. There's a lot of jealousy there. She compares herself to you all the time, though she'd never admit it. Jealous of what? Abigail's disbelief was raw. She's the golden child, always has been. But you're the one who got away. James said simply. You built something entirely your own. And at work, you're respected, Abigail. Really respected. People talk about your leadership, your strategic thinking. When I realised Elizabeth's sister was the same Abigail Harper everyone at Vertex admires, it was strange. Abigail sat in stunned silence. While she'd felt like a failure in her family's eyes, she'd become a role model at work without realising it. Elizabeth has been poisoning your relationship with your parents, James continued. Small comments, reframing your absences as rejections, exaggerating arguments. Your mum's been having some health issues, mild depression, memory problems. Elizabeth's been managing her social calendar, her medications. It's given her influence. The implications were staggering. While Abigail built her career, Elizabeth had constructed a narrative in Chicago, casting her as the villain, the cold-hearted daughter who abandoned her family. Why are you telling me this? Abigail asked. You're dating my sister. Your loyalty should be to her. Because what happened in there was wrong, James said. And because at Vertex, I've seen how you treat people, with respect, even when they make mistakes. The stories don't match up. Also, selfishly, it's awkward when your girlfriend's family drama involves your boss. Abigail laughed despite herself, a small release of tension. I can imagine. So, what are you going to do? James looked out at the lake, its surface shimmering in the fading light. I'll support whatever you decide. Just remember, I have to see these people at holidays. I've learned a thing or two about handling difficult personalities, Abigail said, reaching for the door handle. Let's go back inside. Walking back into the boathouse was like stepping onto a battlefield. The celebration was in full swing, 60 guests mingling around tables adorned with white linens and spring flowers. A slideshow played on a screen, a curated history of the Harper family that barely included Abigail. Patricia sat at the central table, radiant in lavender, laughing with Uncle Richard. She hadn't seen the drama at the door. Elizabeth noticed them first, her eyes widening as she crossed the room. But James acted faster, his voice cutting through the hum of conversation. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Abigail Harper, Patricia's daughter, and, he added with perfect timing, my boss at Vertex Technologies. The room fell silent. Patricia's head snapped up, her eyes finding Abigail's with a mix of confusion and joy. Abigail, she said, standing, her napkin falling to the floor. You came. Before Abigail could respond, Elizabeth reached them, her face flushed. With anger. James, what are you doing? She hissed. The right thing, he said calmly. Robert appeared, his expression thunderous. I thought I made myself clear at the door. You did, Abigail replied, her voice steady as steel. But there's been some confusion about my relationship with this family that needs clearing up. Patricia approached, her concern palpable. What's going on, Robert? Why do you look so angry? Abigail, sweetheart, I'm so happy you're here. Mum, Abigail said, taking her hands, did you think I didn't want to come to your birthday? Patricia blinked, confused. Well, Elizabeth said you were too busy with work, that big project. I never said that, Abigail said firmly. I told you I'd be here. I took time off work. I flew in yesterday. But at the door, Dad told me I wasn't on the guest list, that this party was for people who make time for family. Patricia's face shifted from confusion to shock. Robert, is this true? Robert's jaw tightened. Patricia, we discussed this after what she said at Thanksgiving. We discussed no such thing, Patricia snapped, her voice sharp with rare authority. Abigail is my daughter. Of course she's welcome at my birthday. The room was a crypt, the guests' eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. Abigail addressed her mother but spoke for all to hear. There's been a pattern, For years my words have been twisted, my absences framed as neglect, my choices as rejections. Elizabeth has been systematically undermining my relationship with you." "That's ridiculous," Elizabeth scoffed, but her eyes betrayed her. "Is it?" Abigail turned to James. "What did Elizabeth tell you about me before today?" James hesitated, then spoke. "That you were cold, career-obsessed, that you'd called your mother unsupportive and said the family was holding you back." "I never said those things," Abigail stated. "At Thanksgiving, after Elizabeth accused me of thinking I was better than everyone, I said I built my career myself. That's not an attack, it's a fact." Patricia looked devastated. "Is this true, Elizabeth? Have you been turning us against Abigail?" Elizabeth's composure cracked. "You don't understand. She left. She got to become Miss Bigshot while I stayed here, taking care of everything, being the good daughter. And what thanks do I get? You still light up when she calls." The raw pain in her voice silenced the room. Abigail felt a flicker of empathy, seeing her sister trapped in a role as confining as her own had been. "Elizabeth," Patricia said softly, "I've never compared you two. I love you both differently, because you're different people." "Then why do you keep her science fair certificate?" Elizabeth demanded, tears spilling. "3rd place 15 years ago and you still have it." Abigail was stunned. That certificate, a symbol of her mother's quiet pride, had become a wound for Elizabeth, a proof of favouritism that never existed. Robert finally spoke. "I think we should continue this privately." "No," Patricia said firmly. "I'm tired of secrets in this family." She turned to the guests. "I apologise for the drama. Please enjoy the party. My family needs a moment." In a small side room, Patricia took charge. "Sit down, all of you." They obeyed, a family of scolded children. "Robert, did you turn our daughter away at my birthday party?" Robert shifted. "I was protecting you, after what she said about the family." "What exactly did she say?" Patricia pressed. "In her own words, not Elizabeth's interpretation." Robert faltered. "That we were holding her back, that she had to build her life herself because we never supported her." "That's not what I said," Abigail interjected. "I said I built my career myself, which is true. It wasn't an attack." Patricia turned to Elizabeth. "Have you been keeping your sister and me apart?" Elizabeth's defiance crumbled. "I was tired of being taken for granted. Abigail swoops in for holidays, everyone makes a fuss, then she disappears while I'm here every day, driving you to doctor's appointments, helping with the house." "Doctor's appointments?" Abigail interrupted. "What doctor's appointments?" Patricia sighed. "I've been dealing with mild depression and memory issues. Nothing serious, but it's been challenging. Elizabeth has been helpful. You never told me," Abigail said, hurt evident. "Elizabeth suggested it might stress you out with your demanding job," Patricia admitted, then frowned. "But I see now that wasn't her decision to make." "I'm sorry," James spoke up. "I should have said something sooner. I've witnessed conversations where things Abigail supposedly said were exaggerated." Elizabeth turned to him, betrayed. "You're taking her side. Your boss over your girlfriend." "It's not about sides," James said. "It's about the truth." "I want to try again," Abigail said into the silence. "All of us. But we need honesty. No more triangulation. No more gatekeeping." Patricia took her hand. "I want that too. I've missed you, Abigail, more than you know." Robert cleared his throat. "I may have misjudged some things. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start." Elizabeth remained silent, tears streaming down her face. Her carefully crafted image was crumbling, and Abigail couldn't tell if she was mourning or relieved. The party resumed, the tension lingering but lighter. Abigail's gift, the emerald brooch, brought tears to Patricia's eyes. "How did you know?" she whispered. "You showed me Grandma's jewellery box when I was 10, Abigail said. "You said the lost brooch was your favourite. You remembered that?" Patricia's voice broke. "After all these years?" "I remember everything important, Mum. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance." Abigail extended her stay. In Chicago, spending time with Patricia, having stilted conversations with Robert, and giving Elizabeth space. At Vertex, James requested a transfer to product development, removing himself from Abigail's chain of command. "Cleaner boundaries," he explained over coffee. "Elizabeth gave me an ultimatum, quit Vertex or lose her. I told her I respect myself too much to let anyone dictate my career." "I never meant to come between you," Abigail said. "You didn't," James assured her. "This was coming anyway. Your confrontation just brought it to light." Patricia's health became a new priority. Her doctor confirmed early-stage cognitive decline, manageable with treatment but a reminder of time's fragility. "I should have told you sooner," she said during a call. "Elizabeth thought—" "Mum," Abigail interrupted gently, "from now on, tell me directly. We need to rebuild without intermediaries." "I promise," Patricia said, her voice firm. "And I've been thinking. Could I visit you in Boston? See your life there?" The question stunned Abigail. In 15 years, her parents had never visited. "I'd love that, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Patricia's visit was transformative. Abigail took days off work, showing her mother her apartment, her favourite coffee shop, the hidden garden where she read. At Vertex, Patricia beamed with pride as colleagues praised Abigail's leadership. "It's beautiful," she said as they walked along the Charles River. "Your life here, I can see why you love it." Back in Chicago, small steps continued. Robert sent emails about the tech industry, his interest awkward but genuine. Elizabeth began therapy, a sign she was confronting her role in the family's dysfunction. 2 months after the confrontation, she called Abigail. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said. "I understand now that I was wrong about some things. The way I portrayed you wasn't fair." "Thank you," Abigail said cautiously. "Jesse says you've been professional. About everything. He respects you a lot." "He's a good person," Abigail replied. "Whatever happens, I think he cares about you." 6 months after the confrontation, Abigail hosted Thanksgiving in Boston, a reclaiming of the holiday that had broken her. Patricia and Robert attended, along with Tyler and his new girlfriend. Elizabeth declined but sent a thoughtful gift basket. As they gathered around the table, Patricia raised her glass. "Thank you, Abigail, for bringing us together, not just physically but emotionally. Your courage to speak truth has changed our family." Robert nodded, his voice thick. "I've been thinking about the kind of father I've been. I'm proud of you, Abigail. Your success, yes, but more importantly, your integrity." The acknowledgement brought tears to Abigail's eyes. Later, as they cleaned up, a text from Elizabeth arrived. "Hope dinner went well. Maybe next year." Those words held more hope than 1,000 forced smiles. At Vertex, Abigail's leadership evolved, her authenticity deepening her impact. She mentored young women, sharing lessons from her journey. "Your worth isn't determined by family, approval or professional achievements," she told an analyst struggling with parental expectations. "It comes from living authentically." A year after the confrontation, Abigail received a letter from Elizabeth, handwritten and raw. "I've spent my life trying to be the daughter Mum and Dad wanted," it read. "I saw you as the one who escaped, and I hated you for it. I'm sorry for the lies I told, the walls I built. I don't know if we'll ever be close, but I'm trying to be honest." Abigail read the letter in her office, the Boston skyline glittering beyond her window. She thought of the emerald brooch, now Patricia's favourite, worn to every family gathering. She thought of the therapy session planned for next month, a commitment to healing. And she thought of the girl who once stood in the shadows, now standing in the light of her own truth. Unbeknownst to Abigail, another figure had watched the boathouse confrontation unfold. Rachel, her assistant, had followed her to Chicago, sensing the trip's importance. From the parking lot, she saw Abigail's rejection, heard Elizabeth's laugh, and witnessed James's intervention. Rachel, fiercely loyal, had been quietly documenting the family's dynamics, gathering evidence of Elizabeth's manipulations from old emails and texts Abigail had shared in moments of vulnerability. When Abigail returned to Boston, Rachel presented her findings, not as a weapon, but as a shield. "If they ever try to rewrite your story again," she said, "you have the truth on your side. Abigail never used the evidence. The truth, once spoken, had been enough. But knowing it existed gave her peace, a reminder that even in the game of family, there are unseen allies waiting to tip the scales."